Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Zoom with the principal on this. Well, it's starting to dry out, but it's still a chilly morning. I hope you guys all have power. I don't know if there's power outages in our area. I know in a lot of places there were. My power actually stayed on this time, amazingly enough, but our cable and internet went out, which meant we had no Wi-Fi, which was all right for most of us. My son, who's 13, did not enjoy that. But he did go to bed on time last night. So I think there's a correlation. Okay, so our topic today is raising an independent, self-confident teen. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about raising an independent teen first and give you some tips with that. And then I'm going to give you some tips, like once we have like the independent teen, then we'll talk about having them be self-confident. So that's my plan for today. In doing my research for this topic, I came across this book called Raising Independent, Self-Confident Kids. 9 Essential Skills to Teach Your Child or Teen. I have not read it yet. It just came in the mail the other day. I am going to read it, and I'm thinking if it's good, if I like it, I'm going to use it as our book club book for next year. So I will keep you posted on that. And if I enjoy this book, I guess it means it's a fairly easy read. It's not like crazy boring. I'm not falling asleep reading it, but it's, and then it's got good information in it. So I will keep you posted on that. But so let's talk about raising an independent teenager. I think as a parent, theoretically, that's something that we want. We want our teens to learn how to do things on their own because we want them to eventually move out of our house, right? I think all of us kind of like shudder at the thought of having a 30-year-old still living in our house and that we're still taking care of them and cooking for them. Like, you know, kind of the natural progression of things is they move away and they become independent adults. And so they want to start. The teenage years is when they really should start exhibiting this independence. And that's totally normal for their brain development as teenagers, that they start wanting to exert some independence. They start wanting to be more like an adult. What can happen, though, is some adult behavior is not appropriate for teenagers, and they can do some risky things and have some risky behavior. And so that makes us as parents want to take that independence away from them. So it's a balance as a parent between encouraging their independence and then also having them do it in a safe way. So that's really what I'm going to be talking about today, is how to do this in a way that you are maintaining that balance. I'll be totally honest. Sometimes I don't straddle that line very well. Sometimes I feel like I give too much independence and I probably should, have like more control as a parent. And then sometimes I'm like way too controlling. But like everything, it's a balance. And, I share with you mistakes I've made to hopefully learn from my mistakes, and that we're all a parent community. And we're in this together. So my first tip with raising independent teen, and this should be obvious, but show your teen that you love and support them. So how do you do this? Because when they're teenagers, they tend, especially if you have boys, I think girls are literal more okay with still getting hugs and stuff. But if you try to hug your teenage boy, like if I tried to hug my teenage boy, if we were just alone, he'd be like, "Oh, Mom, get away." But God forbid I do that out in public. He would like disown me. He'd be horrified. So they don't like the hugs and the I love yous anymore. If I said I love you to my son, he would go, like that would be the response I get. That doesn't mean you stop doing it. So different ways that you can show love for your teenager. Be interested in what they're doing. Activities that they're doing, show interest in their hobbies, their activities, even if you actually really don't care about it. My son, he's got his video games that he's really super into, or movies or memes or things like that, he thinks are really funny, and he'll show me, and I'm not entertained by it. I don't get it, but I'll be like, I'll show interest in it and pay attention to him. Show interest in their friends, even if you might not think that their friends are like the greatest. You may find their friends super annoying. You may not think that they're the greatest influence, but we have to, as parents, respect the role that their friends play in their lives. In their teenage years, friends are super, super important. And so showing interest in their friends is actually really important. Be a good listener. One thing, and I think I'll touch back on this, but when they're ready to talk to you, listen. And one thing you have to be careful with, and we've talked and we've given this advice, is you don't always want to tell them what to do. Sometimes that they just want somebody to listen. And so one thing to get in the habit of asking, and this works for all relationships in your life, is, asking, you're listening, and then you say, do you want advice or do you want me just to listen? If they want advice, they'll ask for the advice, but sometimes they just want you to listen. So that's a good thing to get in the habit of asking, not just for your kids, for every relationship you've got in your life. Tell them that you love them. Even if they aren't going to say it back. Again, you've got that 14, 15-year-old boy, they may not say it back. That's okay. Tell them anyway. Tell them that you're proud of them. Say it all of the time so that they just know, or where they may kind of your goal with this is you want them to roll their eyes and be I know. But that's a good thing. Say it all the time. They should never wonder if their parent, loves them and is proud of them. Give them their privacy. So teenagers, one of the things that they're going to want with exerting their independence is they're going to want a certain amount of privacy, and give it to them. Absolutely the worst thing I ever hear parents doing is when they get mad at their kids and then they take the door off their room. I do not recommend that. I don't think that that's ever a good idea. So give them their privacy, but don't give them so much privacy that you're not including them in family events or family discussions. Don't just assume that they're not interested. Always include them. They may or may not be interested, but I think it's important, even if they don't participate, that they know that they're included and part of it. Try not to be judgmental or opinionated about their opinions. Teenagers can have some pretty extreme opinions sometimes. A lot of this is their inexperience with the world. They haven't lived the way we have. As we get older, maybe we get a little bit more jaded. We get I'd like to say as we get older, we get more realistic about how the world actually works. Our teens haven't lived as much as we have. And so they can have some wildly extreme opinions about stuff. I know my daughter will come to me with just kind of the craziest things. And we try not to argue with her. We just oh, explain that to me. Tell me about that. That's a great way to get them to verbalize, their thoughts. So when they come to you with this crazy, idea about the world, just have them oh, tell me about that. Tell me why you think that. And then try not to, even if it might be teasing, try not to ridicule or tease your teen in front of others. Ridicule is a hard word. That's kind of harsh, but I am somebody that I tease people I love. And this is something that I definitely have had to learn to not do that to my teenager in front of other people, because they're super sensitive and it can definitely backfire. So that's all about ways that you can show love. My second point is respect your teens' emotions and needs. We talked about this last week when we talked about what was normal teenage behavior. Teenagers have a lot of emotions. they're facing a lot of turmoil and stuff. It may mean that we don't think is worthy of all that turmoil, but for them, it's a big deal. They often are confused. They're anxious. They can show anger a lot. They've just got a lot of emotion going on. Hear them out, listen to them, listen to their opinions, especially about things like family decisions, like, you are contemplating a move because maybe you've got a job opportunity and you're thinking about relocating because it's going to be good for your career. That's definitely a conversation that you want to include your teenager in because it's very much going to affect their life. One thing that's important as a parent is to remember you are the parent and you're maybe making a family decision about something like a move, or maybe it's even like, a family vacation or something like that. And you're still the parent. You are the decision maker in the relationship, but it's important to hear out your teenager and to talk to them about it so that you know and you understand their emotions and their needs and how they're feeling. If you're able to compromise with them, and obviously something about like relocating and moving, maybe that's something that you can't compromise, but maybe it's like a trip that you're planning and they want it, maybe they have someplace they want to go. Maybe there's like somewhere like you can find some compromise with them and like let them have a voice. That would be really important. But overall, like what's important with this is you're asking their opinion and you're getting them to talk about how they feel and getting them to share what they want. They're not always going to get what they want, and that's an important life lesson too. But I think that that's important for families to talk about this. This seems honestly kind of like, well, of course I'm going to include my kid in it, but I can't tell you how many times I see families not do this. And like people like my very like close friends of mine, close family friends, where I look at what's happening in their family dynamic and they're not including their teenager in these conversations. And they're like, well, this is just what we're going to do. And I've seen it backfire in families where like there's a lot of resentment later on. So my advice is to try to avoid that. So my third point when we're talking about independence is I mentioned privacy before. But then, of course, we've got the safety concerns. So, like I mentioned at the start, your teenagers, with their push for independence, this is a time in their life where they want to be more of an adult. And with that means that they may want to be doing adult things. They may want, we talked a couple weeks ago about sex. They may want to be having sex. They may be experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And it could be like minor, like less like dangerous things, but like, they want to get their driver's license and be driving and like things like that. It's like stuff that, in the adult world, they want to get a job and like that sort of thing. So it's important for you as the parent to establish, if you have not already done so, establish what are your family rules. Agree on what's a reasonable curfew. 8 p.m. is not a reasonable curfew for a teenager, but maybe 11 p.m. is. So come up with like what you think is a reasonable curfew. Come up with your rules for driving. How far can they drive? What are they allowed to have friends in the car? That sort of thing. Definitely, like I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we had that whole topic. We talked about how to talk to your teen about sex. You have to talk to your teens about sex. It's really, really, they are exposed to sex. If they aren't having it themselves, they have friends that are having it. You don't want your teen to learn about sex from their peers. You want them to learn about it from you. So talk to your teens about sex. Talk to your teens about drugs and alcohol. Talk to them about what is acceptable and what isn't. And this, especially with alcohol, can vary from family to family, and what you're comfortable with. Obviously the drinking age in the state of California is, well, across the entire country, is the age 21. But you may come from a culture or a different country where the drinking age is lower than that. And so maybe that's not as big of a deal with you. You have to, like when I was growing up, and I was a teenager, my parents, they were the type of parents that they like when we, especially at Christmas or something like that, like I was allowed to have a glass of wine with dinner. I was not 21 yet. Is that okay with your family? But then like, what's okay, like establishing what's okay when your child is home with you versus when they're out by them with friends and like not at home. And so having those conversations and those rules, I'm not going to tell you this is what your rules should be. This is very much like what's okay with your family. But those are conversations that you need to have with your teenager so that they know what's okay and what's not okay. You don't want to have that be in question. This next point I have is really, really important, and it's really difficult for us as parents. We have to understand that they're not children anymore. Teenagers are not children. And I can't tell you in my job as principal how many times I have parents contact me with concerns about what's going on, and I hear all the time, they're still children. No, they really aren't. And what we have to realize about teenagers, even though they're still our kid and we see all the moments where they act like a kid and they're still young and like the ways that they're still so young, what we have to understand is the rest of the world does not think of teenagers as children. And I want to put yourself in that frame of mind that say you are on, say you're on the light rail. You're on public transportation, you're taking the light rail somewhere, and a group of teenagers comes on and they're being rowdy and like, loud. How do you feel? Do you see them as children or do you see them as adults that are potentially scary? That's how people view teenagers. And so we need to realize this when dealing with our teen, and your teenager needs to realize this too, that they're in this like transition age, that they're not children anymore, but they're not quite adults. They're in that transition age and they need to realize that they can't act like kids. They need to start acting more mature. And one thing that comes, like the more mature your teenager is and the more they act in a mature way, the more likely that they're going to be taken seriously. And so this like, it's kind of like I'm shifting here a little bit. And so let's talk about maturity a little bit and like your teens maturing. One thing to teach, you want to do is you want to give your teens opportunities to take responsibilities for their actions. And so when they screw something up, this was the theme of our book club this year, letting your teach the gift of failure. We have to teach our teens that mistakes are natural. Mistakes are part of life. They're part of growing up, and that's okay. And that part of being a responsible person is owning mistakes. This is something that we as parents can absolutely model, that when we make a mistake ourselves, that we accept it and we apologize, and that we model that behavior of like owning and taking responsibility. That part of like being responsible is saying, oh, I screwed this up and I have to like deal with that. And this is what I have to do. You want to start letting your teens do things that will help them gain trust. Let them get a job. If they want to get a job, let them get a job. That's going to teach them responsibility. It's going to teach them maturity. It's going to show that they can be trustworthy. Because like this circle of like with teenagers, when they want to be independent, in order to be independent, they need to have the trust of their peers and the adults around them. And to get that trust, they need to be responsible. So you see, like they want independence. So they have to have the trust of their peers and their adults in their lives in order to get that independence. In order to have that trust, they have to act responsible. But we as the parents have to do the inverse. As they act more responsible, we have to start to trust them and then give them the independence. So yeah, I think there's a relationship. They want the independence, so they have to earn the trust. They have to be responsible. We have to recognize that as they're responsible, we can trust them and give them more independence. You see how that works? So let me give you an example of this. Driving. Your teenager wants to drive. So the responsible action is they get their learner's permit, they pass the test, they learned all the driving rules and all of the laws and everything so that they get their learner's permit. We start to trust them to be behind the wheel. Like, you're still in the car with them. But if you haven't driven with your teenager and don't think that that's an act of trust, it is. You're taking, they have your life in their hands, because believe me, the first time I drove on 280 with my daughter, I literally was sweating in my feet. It was the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my life. And so believe me, there's a lot of trust that goes with that. But then as, you build that trust and you start to trust that they're a good driver, then you let them they get their license, you let them take the car out on their own, you're not with them. They have that independence. They're now in the car by themselves. That's an independent action. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And hopefully this doesn't come across as a lecture. And then I should have mentioned this beginning. If you guys have any comments or anything, please put them in the chat. You want to start letting your teen do things on their own. As much as you can, as much makes sense in their life and in your life. Some examples that you could start letting them do: making meals. Once they get their driver's license and you've established all that trust and everything, sending them to the store to run errands. That actually, believe me, having a teen that start to drive and being able to send them to the store to pick up some milk because you forgot to get it is the best part of them having a driver's license. So take advantage of that. Start giving them that responsibility. Instead of you emailing their teachers, they are emailing their teachers. They are taking, they've got questions for the counselor, they ask the questions. One thing, we haven't talked a lot about financial literacy, but in the teen years, having them open up, if you haven't already done this, opening up some sort of checking account. If they get a job managing their own money, and that sort of thing, those are really good ways to teach them responsibility and having them start doing stuff on their own while you're still there. I want to go back to the making the meals. Definitely be teaching your teenager to learn how to cook. That is a really important skill that they're going to need later on. When they go off to college, if they have some basic cooking skills, they are going to be much healthier because they're not going to be relying on going to Taco Bell all the time to eat. So they'll be much healthier in the long run. So teach them. You don't have to teach them how to be a gourmet cook. If you're not a cook yourself, maybe you guys can learn to do this together. And this could be something that you do together, but learning some basic skills and having where they've got like 3-4 things that they just know how to make is a really important skill. Another skill that's really important to be teaching them to help them learn independence. And so this is part of that balance and like teaching them these skills so that when they get that independence that you can trust that they're actually going to do this. Teaching them time management and how to prioritize what's important and what's not important. I see this with our teens at Piedmont Hills all the time, where they get so stressed because they have so much to do, especially when they're like super involved in like activities and things like that. Like, this is actually a perfect time of year. Like right now it's Fantastics. Fantastics is on Friday. They're, probably practicing and doing all this stuff, and they've got a lot on their plate and they're probably overwhelmed, especially today. They're a junior, they're taking the SAT today. They've got Fantastic. There's a lot going on right now. Teaching them to prioritize, what's the most important, what do they have time for, and making sure that they still have time to take care of themselves and take time to sleep. at the beginning of the year, we give every single student a student planner. A lot of kids don't use that, and like they really need to learn it and start using and managing out and scheduling their time. We as adults know that we have to do that. I live and die by my calendar. I don't know about you guys, but if something's not on my calendar, I'm not going to remember to do it. Like I put everything on my calendar. And teaching our teenagers how to manage their time and how to do that is a really, really important skill for them to learn. And then finally, yes, teach them how to be safe. This is actually why, like I said, I did some research for this, and I was reading this one and I was like, oh, that's something I need to do. This was an important tip for me. But teaching them, like signing them up for a self-defense class, that's a really important skill for our teens to learn. The world can be scary. And so learning some self-defense maneuvers, that's really important. As they become more independent, you should definitely set up some sort of system with your teen. Like they're going out, they're now driving, they're going out with their friends. Set up some sort of like code system with your teen where they can text you, like you've got some sort of secret code with them where you know, like, hey, they need help, they are in trouble. I also recommend sharing your locations with your teens on your phone. You can do that. If you haven't, I know you can do it on an iPhone. I'm assuming other phones you could do it too, where you share location. Do that and tell your teen it's not that you're like wanting to know their every move, but it's for safety, especially once they're driving and they're going to be out on their own. Do that so that you can know where they are. And so if they do get in trouble, you know how to find them. And that's how like you can like sell this to your kid. It's not that you're going to be controlling them and tracking their every move, and don't control them and track their every move. But just in case you need to find them, you know where to find them. But hopefully by now you've already taught them about 911 and when to call 911. But like when they're out with their friends, do they know how to call 911? Do they know what is like considered an emergency and what's not considered an emergency? These are just things that like, as you have your teenagers going out and doing things on their own where you're not around, this is the stuff that they need to learn. Okay, so that was about kind of just the independence part. I'm going to move on and I'm going to talk about the self-confidence part, because as our teenagers are independent, hopefully they're self-confident too. And the reason that self-confidence is so important is, I have this quote here: teens who have confidence are better prepared to handle peer pressure, navigate challenging dating relationships, and make good decisions and recover from setbacks. Like there's no downside to self-confidence. I guess you could be too self-confident and that comes across as arrogant, and maybe that's bad, but self-confidence is a good thing that we want our teens to have. So with this, so how do we teach our teens to be self-confident? Promote self-improvement is the first tip, but teaching them that there's a difference between self-acceptance and self-improvement. So you don't want them to be constantly critical of themselves, but you do want to foster this, like, I can always get better. I can always learn. I can always improve. I think that that's an important thing that we should have as adults. So engage them in goal setting. And with goal setting, problem solving, if like the goal seems insurmountable, how do they problem solve that? Teach them about attaining goals that are teach them to attain goals that are attainable. Blah, blah, blah. That was a mouthful. So goals that are attainable and within their control, helping them make a plan with that. This is something that is really great to model, because as adults, we often are doing goal setting for ourselves. So maybe you have a goal that you want to get promoted at work, and that you've got this goal, and like, this is the steps that you're taking in order to get that promotion. Talk to your teen about that. Show them like how you're doing this and going through this, and like, model that so that they can see, and I think that that's really, that's a really great way to like teach them. Modeling is so, so important. My second point in teaching them to be self-confident. Praise their effort instead of their outcome. So if they made, well, let's go back to my early, like, say you made this goal, like where you were modeling and you wanted the promotion. Say you didn't get the promotion. How are you explaining that and like showing that and modeling that for your kid and that acceptance? Are you teaching them that you yourself are really proud of the effort that you put in? Yeah, you didn't get the outcome you want, but you're really proud of yourself because you went for it and you did all the stuff. Teach them that, and do that. That's good for our own souls too. We should be very careful, just as people, not to be too self-critical of ourselves. But that's what you want. We don't want our teens to be too self-critical of themselves, where they're constantly beating themselves up, like, oh, they should have gotten an A, but they got a B, and why did they do that? And they should have studied harder. No, praise the effort that they put in. If you see your child like studying really hard or trying really hard, and it could be for something that you think is so silly. I mean, obviously grades aren't silly, but fantastics. Okay. So we have fantastics on Friday. Some students, a lot of students are just like in the audience and they get, really hyped up about it. Some students are much more involved in it and they're the ones participating in the games. Only one class is going to win Friday night. But are we going to praise them about their effort or praise the outcome? So if they're the class that won, well, that's great. But like, say that, hey, you tried really hard. Like, that was like, I'm really proud of the effort that you put into that. And it's important that they don't succeed all the time. For the 3 classes that don't win, that's okay. It's okay. But what's important is they went out there, they had fun, and they tried. That's what's important. My next point in teaching self-confidence is teach assertiveness skills. This is a really important skill for all of us to have. Teens need to know how to speak up for themselves and in an appropriate way. They need to be able to ask for help when they don't understand something in class. They need to, hopefully they're not being bullied, but, the intention behind it may not be bullying, but teenagers can be really blunt and not so nice sometimes. And standing up for themselves, I mean, like, I don't like that, you shouldn't say that to me, means that they're less likely to be treated poorly by their peers. It's an important skill, but it's also important to teach them how to be assertive without being aggressive. You don't want to be the attacker, and like turn that like standing up for yourself into like you're being overly aggressive. This goes back to, I feel like everything's going back to like talking to your kids about sex, but teaching them how to say no when they're in a situation that they find uncomfortable. That's really, really important. You can teach them and have them practice their assertiveness skills by offering them choices at home and offering them freedom to do things that they don't want to do. I love this. Like, if you told your kid to take the trash out and they say no, how are you handling that? But I think that that's important to like teach them without losing your cool. I'm going to give you an example from my own life. I had a hell of a time getting my son to do his math homework the other night. And I was very close to losing it and screaming at him. And I was like doing my deep breathing, like, okay, don't lose it. It's okay. It's okay. And so I told him, like, okay, Nathan, you don't want to do your homework, but you're going to have to face the consequences of that. And he was like, okay. And I was like, well, do you understand what the consequences are? He's like, well, I'll get in trouble at school. I didn't do my homework. And I was like, no, the consequences are going to be more than that, because I'm going to take your iPad away. And so, like, that's fine. You're making this choice, but it's fine. And a couple minutes later, he did his homework. But you don't want your teen to walk all over you. But if they're like, no, I don't want to do it, okay, that doesn't mean there's not consequences, but like, there's no point in like yelling and screaming and like making a big deal about they didn't do their chores. That's something that they can learn. I feel like I'm like losing the thread when we're talking about self-confidence. So encourage new opportunities. The thing about teenagers is they are afraid to a lot of times to try something new. They don't want to fail. They don't want to embarrass themselves. But so encourage them to try something new in a like low, and something that's not as threatening. Like obviously like going out for drama and trying out for the school play, maybe that's a little bit more scary. Some of them may be totally into that, and that's totally fine. But encourage things like joining a new club. Right now where it's the end of March, but maybe in May, we'll have club day where all the clubs like kind of show off, and they have like, they sell food and like they do games and everything like that. That's a great time to have them walk around and be like, okay, what are some clubs that I didn't know about that maybe next year I want to join? And so that could be a new thing that they try this summer. Getting a part-time job and working for the first time, that could be a new thing that they try. Or volunteering someplace if they don't, aren't able to get a paying job, just like volunteering someplace and trying something new could be a great thing to do, especially for those of you that have really shy kids that, can be kind of socially awkward. A job setting is it's structured, and it's less intimidating because it's not usually their peers that they're working for. They're working for an adult. That usually can be a little bit easier. This was great for my daughter. Summers where she started working, it was really good for her to learn some new skills. She still is very introverted, very shy, but it kind of taught her in a professional setting how to act. And that was a really good skill for her. As always, you as the parent, model your own self-confidence. Your teen learns most from what you do, not necessarily what you say. We like saying this stuff is always important, and like saying the right things, but they also watch what you do. So you may be saying something, but if you're doing the opposite, they're going to pay more attention to what you're doing. So model your own confidence. If you're critical about your body and the way you look and like your fitness level or something like that, don't model, making disparaging marks about yourself, because you're teaching your teen to do the same thing. Role model how to face situations with courage and confidence. Role model your own assertiveness and standing up for what's right. And, that sort of thing. Teach them about self-worth and that they shouldn't base their self-worth on superficial things. Things like social media and how many likes they get on social media. That obviously is not something that we want them to base their self-worth on. So they should learn their self-worth on like the values that you as your family think are really important. I had a conversation with my daughter last night. My daughter's in college. She's not home this week. She has spring break. And she wants to be a teacher. We are big on education in our family, obviously. So she wants to be a teacher, and she was expressing doubt last night. She's like, what if I don't want to do this? What if it's too much for me? And so she's like, they talk a lot in my classes about how we are going to have such an important impact on the kids that we deal with, and, that we are role models, and, she's like, what if I can't handle that? Like, what if I'm not a good role model? And she's got all this like fear about this. And so I just told her, and this is kind of, maybe you guys as parents know this also from your experience in dealing with teachers. To me, the most important skill that you need to have as a teacher, content knowledge is important, obviously, especially in high school. You should know what you're teaching about. But to me, like the most fundamental thing that you need as a teacher is kindness, and like the value and valuing kindness. That to me is absolutely the most important thing. And so conversation I had with my daughter is last night was recognizing her self-worth and her internal kindness. She's a very kind person. And so telling her that I thought that she was well suited to be a teacher, that like, because she has that internal kindness, like that's what's most important. But, I was seeing her doubting her self-worth because maybe she's not sure she can do this. And so really like recognizing and like teaching our kids what's important inside versus things, the social media and getting likes on Instagram and like that sort of thing. That's not what's important. And so making sure that like you're having those conversations, but again, modeling it, not because what you do and not just what you say. So are you yourself on Instagram and like posting things and worrying about your own likes? I hope you're not, but you might be. But like recognize that you've got a value within yourself, what's important, and your own self-worth. I feel like I've like been all over the map today, but hopefully this gave you some things to like think about. Finally, like, I guess my whole, like to sum up the whole topic today is it's important for, as parents, when they're teenagers, to balance giving them freedom and independence with still giving them guidance and teaching them the right way and the things that we want them to be doing and being the person that we want them to be. You don't want to be micromanaging their choices as the parent of a teenager. If you are micromanaging their life and micromanaging all of their choices, you're just reinforcing that you think that they can't be trusted with independence. And I don't think that that's what we want to be teaching our kids at all. I don't think any of you want to be doing that. So we got to teach them, like, if they make a mistake, that they learn with the consequences of those mistakes, and that we, are modeling this for, them. And yeah, hopefully I, like I said, I feel like I've been all over the place today with my topic, and throwing out a lot of stuff. Hopefully you found this helpful a little bit. If you have any comments that you want to put in the chat or something that you've been thinking or like trying, or conversations that you've had with your kids, feel free to share. While you guys are thinking about that and wanting to type in the chat, I'll go ahead and preview what's going to happen next week. I'm actually not here next week. I won't be at school Monday through Wednesday next week. I'm going on a WASC visit. WASC, I've talked about this before when they came to Piedmont Hills, but WASC is the body that accredits schools, and makes sure that, the diploma is like the school's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so part of that is people from schools go visit other schools. So we had our midterm WASC in January, and so people from other schools came here and visited us. And so now I'm going to another school. I'm going to a school in Hercules, California, which I'm not, it's in West Contra Costa County. So a little bit of ways from here, not that far, but that's where I will be. We are still going to have a Zoom with the principal next week. It's just not going to be with me, but our 2 social workers will be here, Ms. Marshall and Ms. Gunter, and they're going to be talking about suicide and depression. So that's actually a really, really important topic. They are the experts on that. And so they are going to be running the Zoom next week. So we're still going to have one. You're just not going to have it with me. So Lan says, thank you for sharing the information. It helps me rethink how to parent my teenagers. Yeah, I think this is important to kind of think about. You know, I think as parents of teenagers, we get caught up in the day-to-day stuff. And we don't, I think it's important sometimes to sit back and reflect, like, okay, how am I parenting my teenager, and like, what messages am I sending out, and how am I doing that, especially with this like the idea of them exerting their independence, because it can be really scary. The world is scary, and there's a lot of stuff out there. I heard a story the other day, you know, of a parent who, her son was going out on a date and she didn't like trust him. So she was like following him around the mall because she didn't trust, you know, he was with this girl. And it was like, God, that's awful. Like, what is that? What message is that sending? You know, we have to teach our kids to be responsible. I think the most important thing I took away from like doing the research of this is kids have to be responsible so that we trust them, and then we get them independence, and that like relationship, so that the kids know that too. So when our teens, like they're saying, I want to be independent, he's like, okay, you have to be responsible. And then I trust you. And then I give you the independence. And like that relationship, that we as a parent understand that, and our teenagers understand that. Like that to me is our biggest, my biggest takeaway from like researching this topic for you today. So hopefully that was valuable. And like I said in the very beginning, a lot of you came in late, but I came across this book in researching this topic. It's called Raising Independent, Self-Confident Kids, 9 Essential Skills to Teach Your Child and Teen. I'm going to read this book and see if it's good. It may be our book club book for next year. So we'll see. I'll let you know if I find it good. Okay. So thank you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. It's supposed to dry out a little bit. AL says, very helpful, some stuff for me too, working on myself, modeling right, thank you. And keep up your great work in your morning workouts. This is inviting you to wake up too. I'm telling you guys, and it took me until I was in my mid-40s to figure out how to do this. But finally, like learning and like getting myself up and working out in the morning before work has changed my life. It's the first time in my life that I am like consistent with my working out. It makes my days so much better. It's like, if I can like convince you to do anything, get up early and work out before you start your day and just get it done. It makes such a difference. So I hope that inspires you. Author of the book that I'm reading is Wendy L. Moss and Donald A. Moses. So Wendy L. Moss, M-O-S-S, PhD, and then Donald Moses, M-O-S-E-S, the doctor. So we'll see. See if it's good. I have not read it yet. Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm going to close this up now. Like I said, I won't be with you next week, but the Zoom is still happening. And the really, really heavy topic, depression and suicide, but super, super important topic. Okay. All right. Have a great week. Thank you.